I am very sorry to hear that your other supplier treated you that way. That's not right. That's something that I've never even heard of in this business. When it comes to making a sale and converting your prospects over to paying customers and paying clients, you have to show empathy. Keep in mind that most buyers connect and talk to you. Why? Because there's a problem. What are they looking for? Solutions. What do they want? For you to listen to them and understand and empathize with their problems. Hi, I'm Shawn Casemore, and I help you learn how to be a high-performing sales professional so that you can sell more and make more in less time. If that sounds good to you, and I don't know why it wouldn't, make sure you click subscribe so you get notified each and every time I release a new video. Click like on this video if you like it, which tells me you want more of this kind of content. Let's get into it. Let's start here. What is empathy? Let's start with a quick definition. Empathy is understanding the concerns, frustrations of your buyer. It is not the same as sympathy. Sympathy is when I feel your emotion. So if I was at heaven forbid, a funeral of some kind, I would probably feel sympathetic towards the person who lost a loved one because I would feel that emotion myself. I would get upset myself. Empathy is that I understand, but I don't necessarily feel sympathetic towards it. Buyers aren't looking for our sympathy, but they do want empathy, which is really listening and understanding their situation, because we want to be listened to. We want to be heard, right? People that actually engage with you, why do they do that? Because they want somebody to listen to them. So we need to do that. But there's some key methods that you need to use to ensure you're demonstrating that empathy. Just listening and nodding does not show empathy. Let me tell you what does. Let's jump into the first one. The foundation that you build empathy upon is active listening. I've done other videos on that, so I'm not going to dive too deep here, but I want you to think about this. If somebody is explaining to you the challenges, the issues, maybe they're answering the question that you've asked them from a sales perspective, you need to give them the time to answer. If they pause, if there's silence for a moment, don't interrupt them, wait. The worst that'll happen is they'll say, you know, that's a really good question. I hadn't thought about it that way. And that's a good thing. So don't get nervous, practice active listening. Be patient. Remember, it's okay if there's a little bit of silence, if they're thinking. I mean, I'm not going to just stare at you. That'd be kind of weird, right? But if you're thinking because I've asked you a question, a little bit of silence is okay. I want to make sure I nod. I want to acknowledge, oh, wow, that really sounds harsh. That sounds very difficult. I'm sorry to hear about that, right? These kinds of comments acknowledge that you're listening, which is the foundation. If you want to be empathetic, you have to practice active listening. If you do not, everything else will not work for you. Why? Because our buyer needs to know that we're listening. They need to know first and foremost that we hear them in order to understand them, right? We're not going to demonstrate understanding if we don't first have them believe we're actually hearing what they say. When responding to your buyer, the second thing I want you to consider, once you've listened and you've taken a few notes, you use their language and repeat them back. So for example, your buyer says, you know, we've really got some big budget constraints this year happening. So that's something, Shawn, that you should be aware of. I would say something like, okay, I understand. So you have some budget concerns this year. So definitely we have to make sure we show you a return on your investment if you were to proceed with our product. Would that be true? Right? So I'm taking your language, I'm repeating it back. Now in my case, I did a little bit of a twist and I moved it towards a conversion statement, right? I'm trying to say, oh, so you're gonna proceed with us. Now, that's a little bit, maybe a little more advanced, but the point I'm trying to make is when they share information with you, make note of it mentally, or even better, I still write notes in a book that I carry with me because I want to use that language in our discussion. So you told me X, right? Or in my proposal or quotes, anything like that, because that language suggests to the buyer that what? You're listening. So we've talked in the last tip about repeating back the language of your buyer. The other thing you've got to be able to do is make connections. See this here? Connections. Make connections for your buyer when it comes to the connection between where they're at today and where they will be if they engage with you, your product or service, okay? Another phrase that's been put around this is painting a picture. So what we want to do is make sure the buyer can see themselves using our product or service. Now I'll give you a simple example of this. When I used to sell cars back in my mid-20s, early to mid-20s, and that was a while ago, unfortunately, as you can tell a little bit, right? But when I used to do that, what tended to happen was somebody come into the dealership, they're interested in a car, Once they had an idea of what kind of car they liked, we would try and get them in the car. And I would purposely have them sit in the car, put the window down, and I would say, okay, so how does that feel? Right, there's an emotional question. They'd tell me, I'd practice active listening. Okay, all right, so you're telling me it's pretty comfortable, right? There's active listening. And then I would simply make the connection for them, right? Or paint the picture of what the future state. I'd say, well, you know, in a car like this, you'd be getting twice as good a gas mileage as in that truck you're driving right now. So you've got to make connections for your buyer between where they are today and where they could be. And when you do this, you're demonstrating empathy. Why? Because you're saying, I heard you, this is a concern for you, and my solution's gonna fix that. Right? So making these, here, I'll do it again, these connections, what they'll help you do is paint the picture for your buyer as to what will it look like if I purchase your product or service. And as a result, you're showing that you've listened, you've understood, and you care. And that is empathy. I've got another tip for you. Just hold on here. All right, if you enjoyed this video so far, make sure you click the like button. I'm happy to create more videos. That just tells me you like this content. And make sure you click subscribe so you stay notified and up to date on each and every new video we release. So I tend to get amped up, eager, excited. It might not look like it right now, but I can be. And what tends to happen, especially in a meeting with a buyer, even going back to those early days when I was selling cars, is I can tend to talk over a buyer sometimes. So we're having a good conversation, and what tends to happen is they might share something and they'll keep talking, and I'll want to mention that point because it's an important point that they mention, but I think I'll forget about it if I don't say it, and I accidentally, oh my gosh, I talk over the buyer. Never, ever, ever, never, never talk over your buyer. Never. If you need to, and here's a strategy I started using, I started taking notes. So if they're talking, I'll just make bullet points on a piece of paper, and when they're done, I'll say, you know, you raised a few good points. I just want to revisit for a moment. You said X, right? And I can go back. So by making notes, I was able to minimize that tendency. I don't know anybody that likes to be interrupted, so we don't want to interrupt people, no matter how excited we are, no matter how important the point is that they made that we don't want to lose. Make some notes for yourself. Don't talk over the buyer. All right, if you enjoyed this video, make sure you check out this next video here where I give you even more skills to be a high-performing sales professional. Down below is a link to what I call the 30-day sales action planner, organized in a way that you can actually set up your goals, your targets for the next 30 days, and it prompts you through planning to achieve those targets.